So the 10 lessons are based around the sprint approach. So the sprint is the 10-week exercise that we do with clients, where we work internally with their teams. I tried to come up with an unusual number. I thought 7 might be useful, but we ended up with 10, weirdly, which is a bit of a cliche, but there you go. So we start with the immune system and the importance of addressing the immune system right up front, rather than just letting it come and bite you on the backside later on. And it's really important to do that. And one of the ways that we do that is to separate out the projects into edge and core projects. And it's really important to understand the difference between that and the reason for the edge initiatives being early addressing of the immune system and keeping things outside of the core organisation that potentially is going to attack them. Then I think the second area of the lessons is around education. What you find is that you have a whole range of people who understand different things, have been exposed to technologies in different ways. It's important to get everybody up to a good level and help them really understand how massive this fourth industrial revolution is and the impacts that they may face or likely to face in the coming years. And we try to do that right from the top. So the awake session we find is really, really important in terms of giving everybody a sort of lift in terms of their understanding of the technologies and the opportunities and the risks. Then when we're running the sprints, we find that the team structure is really important. In lots of organizations, people are used to working in functional silos. We try and break that down immediately, pull them all together into a mixed team. So people from a range of different functions and a range of different ages usually works best. We have tried other approaches, but usually a range of ages and different levels within the organization. So we don't look for everybody to be on the same level. We try and remove hierarchies and we try and work in an autonomous way. And what we find is that that's really useful because it empowers people once they start to understand that they have a voice. It enables them to be a little bit more powered. You get the decisions made very quickly because you've got all the right people in the room, and it enables them to move at real pace, which is a great sort of force for good in the sprint. Then we've got what's next? I think there's some areas around recognizing that you don't know everything and you need to get out of the building. You need to go and talk to customers. You need to go and talk to suppliers and potential partners and people who are doing interesting things. And often organisation boundaries stop you from doing that. And we really encourage people to get out of the room, and they find it absolutely invigorating and really enabling for the process. And so we get a lot of good feedback about that. Then there's some lessons around experimentation and proving what your assumptions are. And so we find that teams will come up with what they think are great ideas, and they would almost, in a traditional word, would almost blindly push on with those ideas. What we find in the sprint is that we push them into understanding what the hypothesis behind those ideas are. Will they really work? Will they survive the first contact with the customer? And so we get them to design experiments and to run experiments and to learn that failure is okay, and then adapt the ideas and move on. And I think that's a great learning point for many people. Then there's a couple more. One which I termed "Poo Smells Eventually," which got some interesting feedback. I kind of stole that from a colleague on one of the sprints, but it really sort of summed up that if you don't test the difficult things first, you're going to blindly push on with ideas, and maybe they're not going to work in the end because you're just trying to hide the fact that you really don't know how this is going to work and if it's going to work. So the importance of testing the tough things early. Who smells eventually? It sort of resonated for me, and I think it does for a lot of the teams. And then finally, I think you need, as an organization, if you're going to put teams into this, you need to recognize that they are going to change and they're going to struggle to go back to their normal daily work life. And we find that quite often, that the people who embrace it really struggle to go back because they've worked at a much faster pace in a much more open environment. They felt much more empowered. They get really wedded to the process and to the ideas. And so if you're going to do this, you need to really think about it in advance, and you need to have a plan. And that plan often is allowing people to continue on the projects, or allowing people to run more sprints, or allowing people to help change the organization internally to do more of this sort of stuff. But if you don't, you might find that you lose some good people. So it's kind of a warning lesson as well as a positive lesson. The key moment for me, I think, is where participants recognize that this process allows them to fail, and that it's not, that they need to reframe their concept of failure as validated learning. And it's really, really important, because what happens is most of the teams come in and they have a sort of pre-wired fear of going to their bosses and saying they've not managed to do something, or something has not turned out the way that they thought it was going to be. And if you rewire that into a validated learning concept where you're testing a hypothesis, and whether you pass or you fail, you are learning. And as long as it's validated learning that you can move forward with and use to change the idea somehow, or make sure you've not wasted a load of money on something which is never gonna work. I think that's really important, and people, you really notice them change once they realize that. And they're just usually scared of going to their bosses and saying, like, this didn't work. So when they can go to their bosses and say, this is what we learned this week, it's so much of a different approach. And the way we do it with the cross-functional teams and the autonomous teams allows them to learn together, and I think that really adds to it as well. And it frees people to think a little bit differently, and it also enables them, I think, to think a bit bolder and try things that they wouldn't have done in an environment where they were so scared of failure. So for me, that's the epiphany moment in the sprint. I like most of the tools, actually. I think that some of the power of this as an approach is that it's got some great tools, and they've all been co-created and designed and tested, road tested, and so on. I love the transformation playbook. I can't claim to have written it, but I did get involved in supporting the development of it, and was lucky enough to be one of the case studies in it, one of the jobs that I did. I think it's a goldmine. Use it all the time. There's loads of techniques and tips and thoughts and experience packed into that book. It's just brilliant. And I also like the ExO toolkit, which we put together for the course that we run externally. So for each of the main attributes from the exponential methodology, there's a little tool that helps you really think through how you go about applying that tool. And I think a lot of it is now represented in the playbook, but before that, it was really useful as well.